There's something going on in Kansas City right now that a lot of people are not familiar with, and you're very familiar with. And it's actually, according to a lot of people I've talked to, it's going around the country. Can you talk to what I'm talking about?
Sure. There's a move towards socialism amongst a lot of people that consider themselves housing advocates, which they really aren't if you really break it down. There's socialists that are out of Chicago. There's a movement called the People's Action Movement. And they are infiltrating cities and states across the way. And what they do is they disguise themselves as housing advocates with their tenant protection laws. And they have their little T-shirts and matching T-shirts and then the little homemade signs, different places. And they'll go and say that they're looking out for the average tenant or the renter. And they're advocates for affordable housing. All things are false. But it is their storyline and it's working. Their messaging is effective.
Well, I think what they're effective about is, like you said, so I remember when we fought the HOA lobby in Las Vegas, is they had all these people that were paid to be there. They looked like they were a well-organized unit, but the reality is they were just paid. And it looked like, from looking at the Zoom meeting that you were at in person, that it was just like a bunch of paid people from KC Tenants. Now, when you look into KC Tenants, you see there's a girl who runs it. Her name is Tara. I don't remember her last name. Do you remember?
Ragavir.
Tara Ragavir. She's an Australian-born, and she went to Harvard. It looked like she grew up in a very privileged life in Mission, Kansas. And her agenda, I don't know what it is. I have zero idea what it is, other than to disrupt what is going on right now. Do you know what her agenda is?
Well, of course it is. And you're exactly right. It's disrupt. And then along the socialist philosophy in housing, nothing is privately owned. And so you know how the socialists say you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah.
So that is their goal. And so what the thing that, and I don't take her background away from her. That's her business, and lucky for her that she lived that life. But I'm worried about the people that she's influencing, that are following her lead now, that don't really know what's happening. In my mind, and I hope this isn't too harsh, but I think they're being indoctrinated, that they're getting a lot of followers who are thinking they're doing the right thing, they belong to something, they're part of this movement, and they don't really know the true movement. Her goal is social housing, to eliminate private ownership of real estate. They want to decommodify housing. It should not be for purchase. You should not be able to buy or sell real estate, really.
Right.
And so that's one of her goals, is to decommodify housing. And the second one is to disincentivize speculators, those of us who are investors and developers and builders, to disincentivize us and basically put us out of business by making the laws so horrible that we leave the marketplace.
So what have you done to try to fight this? Because you've been kind of leading this so this is how I met you, just to let you know. I don't know if I told you this. So we have an excellent dog sitter, and his name is Dog. And he was on your email list. He's like, are you paying attention to what's going on? Do you want me to get you added to the list? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I got added to your email list, which are very organized. You're a highly organized woman. And so I get all these emails. Everything's like, hey, this is where you need to be. This is where it needs to go on. And I'm like, okay, this lady's on it. And when I saw that, I'm like, I don't agree with this. Like, I don't want to, so many people want to be the quiet voice. I don't want to be the loud voice, but I definitely want to speak up when something is complete bullcrap and it's being shoved down and the thing that really pissed me off, and I'll tell you this, I'm going to speak very straightforward with you. They kept using the word discrimination. You're an African-American woman, and they were using the word discrimination. The council people were using the word discrimination. The people were trying to do the phone, and they're trying to divide us by trying to say, oh, you know what? You landlords are bad people, even though we're providing affordable housing, which is a non-for-profit activity, a 501(c)(3) activity. They're saying you're bad people, and you're racist, basically, is what I heard. And so it's like, okay, I can't go in down there and like, what am I going to say? You know what I mean? Like I've fixed over 100 houses in 18 months. I moved to Kansas City. They're going to be like, oh, well, you're a greedy landlord. It's like, okay, you guys have the problems. So how do you see what they're trying to do? Because can you break down what bill that they passed and how we stop it?
Okay, yes. And then I want to go back a little bit if
Please.
I can. And part of my testimony is to say, first of all, I'm a housing provider, and I'm tired of them calling us racist.
Yeah.
Because we are not racist. And so the group, the tenant group, what they've been successful so far in doing is painting the picture that the person they're trying to help is a black woman. A black woman with children is the typical voucher holder for the Section 8 vouchers.
Right.
And so that's what they use as their argument. And they must divide it. It must always be us versus them, rich versus poor, property owner versus renter, landlord versus renter, black versus white, all of that, the oppressor and the oppressed. So that is their messaging very successfully. And so one thing that I found is that, and I don't normally look at race. It's not important to me. It's not important in my everyday life. But in this particular case, in that particular day, I had to tell the black woman who was calling us racist that I, a black woman, am not a racist. Yeah. And I am tired of her calling my peers. How'd
that make you feel that they're kind of categorizing you as a racist and you're an African American woman and just because they're calling you racist because you own rental property, essentially it.
And so it's silly.
Right.
I mean, it's just silly, a silly argument. So my hope is by saying, hey, I'm not racist, that they look at the silliness of that to have a black woman saying I'm not racist.
Yeah.
Crazy. And calling my peers racist. I mean, it's just a stupid argument, just plain and simple.
Yeah.
And so my hope was just to disarm, because I saw her face go from a smile to like, uh-oh, when I said that. And I know her. I know most of them and have for a long time. But anyway, the focus is housing. So you know that what we try to do, we're in business to create housing, period.
Right.
We want to create housing. Somebody walks to our door, we have a vacant unit. Our goal is to say yes.
Yeah.
I want to say yes.
Absolutely.
But I have to do it in a smart way.
Yeah, you don't want to. And there's the other thing that I didn't think about, and sorry to interrupt you, but I want to address this before it leaves my mind.
Right.
Is like they said in this law that you have to accept people with criminal records. Mm-hmm. What about sex offenders? Was there a carve out for that?
Mm-mm. No carve outs.
Yeah. So exactly like what they're saying is that, oh, you know what? This guy who just molested 15 people, who's now out on jail. Oh, you got to accept him. You can't use his criminal history, even though everybody else is going to use it, but you as a housing provider can't use it. Like, they wouldn't hire him at the city. They wouldn't hire him at KC Tenants. They wouldn't hire him for a job.
Well, the city had, the argument that they use is they have banned the box where you can't use it against them for the city. And so they're trying to put this in place in real estate, but it's silly to think that, especially if you have an apartment building, you have those people living so close together,
right,
and all of a sudden you have a violent criminal in there and you can't say no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just... I don't know how many times I'm going to use the word stupid, dumb, silly, but I think this...
I'll use them with you. This is the stupidest... And you mentioned something on the phone. You don't think these people have even read what they're trying to propose?
I don't think so. I think the council members have not.
Yes.
And because if you, first of all, anybody with common sense, if they read this ordinance, you're going to look and say, this is crazy.
Yeah.
You're going to say that. And so I have a feeling from some of our meetings with them that they haven't read it thoroughly. I think the KC Tenants put they did a snow job on a lot of people. They told them, here's what's in it. And they had their little sheet that had some things on it. And so people are like, oh, that sounds good. I'm with you. And then they did not read it. And so the city attorney actually worked with them to put it together. And keeping in mind who them is. So in a room, you have these tenants.
So the city attorney
prepared the ordinance that was put in front of all these council members who didn't read it. So normally they would, hopefully, I would think, collaborate with people. So you have a housing policy, talk to the people who provide housing.
Yeah, makes sense.
All they had in the room were the yellow shirts, the tenant groups in the room, dreaming and scheming, they call it scheming, of all of the things they can throw in this, everything but the kitchen sink. Other places that have the source of income ordinance do not have you can't use the credit score, you can't use all that other stuff.
Right.
They don't have that in there. They threw everything in there, plus it impacts homeowners. So someone who owns a home, you may think, oh, this is just the housing provider, landlord issue, this doesn't impact me. It impacts anyone who's going to sell a piece of property as well.
Right.
So you may be Mary Smith with your little 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Brookside that you're going to sell. Wake up. This impacts you too. Because what they do with it is they expand the protected classes. So we know the protected classes, fair housing.
Right.
You can't discriminate based on race, color, familial origin, and handicap, all of that. Now, all of those. And so they added in source of income.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden you can't discriminate against someone if the ordinance passed as written, someone who has a low credit score, who may have been removed from the last property because they had damage reports, someone who's been evicted, which means they didn't pay for their past rentals.
Why would we not want to accept them?
Exactly. Criminal history and arrest history, all of those things. And you can't also discriminate against someone who gets their money from, we don't know where. Maybe it's cash. I don't know. And maybe it's maybe they just started driving Uber 2 weeks ago, but they don't have a payment history behind them or an employment history. You got to take them all. And you can't say that you must make 2 times the rent amount or 3 times the rent amount. No qualifications. So the ultimate goal for the socialists is there's a housing guarantee. Housing is a human right. Everyone has the right to have housing, regardless of ability to pay for it or not, regardless of background or not. So literally, if it passed the way it was written, anyone can present themselves to you and say, hey, I want to rent your unit, let me in. You have to say yes, or else be subject to a discrimination complaint.
And a fine.
And a fine.
How much is the fine?
Fine is $1,000.